For over 3 millennia, mighty emperors ruled from dragon-carved thrones, shaping the destiny of one of the world's oldest civilizations. From legendary beginnings in the mists of myth to the grandeur of the Forbidden City, China's dynasties have risen and fallen in a tapestry of war, wisdom, power, and poetry. These emperors didn't just reign, they crafted the very soul of a nation that still echoes their legacies today. What secrets lie behind their crowns, their conquests, and their collapses? Welcome to Words of Time, your gateway into the past. In this video, we'll journey through the epic saga of the Dragon Thrones, Dynasties of China, tracing the story from the mythic Xia to the mighty Qing. Get ready to explore over 3,000 years of imperial intrigue, cultural brilliance, and historical transformation. The mythic dawn, Xia and Shang dynasties. The history of imperial China begins not with ironclad records, but with echoes of legend and fragments of archaeology. The mythic origins of China are rooted in the Xia dynasty, traditionally considered the first dynasty in Chinese history. Although definitive archaeological evidence remains elusive, the Xia occupies an important place in the Chinese historical consciousness. It serves as a cultural cornerstone, symbolizing the dawn of civilization and organized rule. According to ancient texts such as the records of the Grand Historian and the Bamboo Annals, the Xia dynasty was founded by Yu the Great, a sage king renowned for his mastery of flood control. Yu's taming of the Yellow River symbolized humanity's ability to harness nature through virtue and effort, qualities highly prized in Confucian tradition. The succession from Yu to his son Qi marks a transition from tribal federation to hereditary monarchy, a foundational shift that would influence the political order for millennia. While concrete archaeological links to the Xia remain debated, many scholars associate the dynasty with the Erlitou culture, which flourished in the central plains of China around 2000 BCE. Excavations have revealed palatial buildings, bronze casting, and evidence of social stratification, suggesting the emergence of early state-level society. Whether or not these remains belong to the Xia, they illustrate a period of increasing political complexity and technological innovation. Following the Xia, the Shang dynasty rose to prominence around 1600 BCE. Unlike the Xia, the Shang left behind substantial archaeological evidence, including oracle bones, bronze artifacts, and city ruins. The Shang dynasty represents the first verifiable Chinese dynasty, with its capital at Yin, modern-day Anyang, serving as a center of political and religious power. The Shang kings ruled through a network of kin-based alliances and military dominance. Their authority was both political and spiritual, with the king acting as the chief intermediary between the human realm and the ancestral spirits. Divination played a central role in Shang governance. Oracle bones, inscribed turtle shells, and animal scapulae were used to seek guidance from the ancestors on matters ranging from warfare to agriculture. Shang society was hierarchical, with a ruling elite supported by artisans, warriors, and farmers. Bronze casting reached remarkable levels of sophistication, as evidenced by ritual vessels adorned with Taotai motifs. These vessels were used in ceremonial feasts that reinforced social bonds and cosmological order. The production of bronze required centralized control over labor and resources, highlighting the administrative capabilities of the Shang state. Writing also emerged as a vital instrument of Shang rule. The characters etched on oracle bones represent the earliest known form of Chinese script. Many of these characters are recognizable to modern readers, attesting to the continuity of Chinese written language. Writing allowed for record-keeping, ritual precision, and the transmission of knowledge across generations. The Shang religion centered on ancestor worship and a pantheon led by Shangdi, the supreme deity. Rituals were designed to maintain harmony between the earthly and spiritual realms. This belief system laid the groundwork for later religious and philosophical traditions in China, including Confucian reverence for ancestors and Taoist cosmology. Despite their achievements, the Shang were eventually overthrown by the Zhou, who accused them of moral decadence and cruelty. This marked the first invocation of the mandate of heaven, a doctrine that would justify dynastic change throughout Chinese history. According to Zhou narratives, the last Shang king, Zhou Xian, was a tyrant whose excesses brought about divine retribution. Whether myth or history, the Xia and Shang dynasties occupy a formative place in the Chinese imagination. They represent the beginnings of kingship, statecraft, and cultural identity. The artifacts and legends from this era continue to inspire awe and inquiry, reminding us that the roots of Chinese civilization run deep into the mists of antiquity. The mythic dawn, though shrouded in mystery, illuminates the enduring themes of order, virtue, and legacy that define the Dragon Thrones. The Zhou dynasty, which spanned nearly 8 centuries from approximately 1046 BCE to 256 BCE, stands as one of the longest-lasting dynasties in Chinese history. Divided into the Western Zhou and Eastern Zhou periods, the dynasty's narrative reflects both the zenith of political innovation and the fragmentation of central authority. It was during the Zhou that the foundational concepts of Chinese civilization, ritual, morality, governance, and cosmic order took coherent form and began to shape the cultural and political ethos of the empire. The Zhou claimed legitimacy through the concept of the mandate of heaven, a revolutionary idea in Chinese political thought. Unlike the Shang, who asserted divine ancestry, the Zhou argued that heaven, Tian, granted the right to rule based on moral virtue. This mandate could be revoked if a ruler became despotic or failed to fulfill his duties. The Zhou justified their overthrow of the Shang by portraying the last Shang king as cruel and corrupt. This ideological innovation not only legitimized their conquest, but also established a recurring justification for dynastic succession in Chinese history. The Western Zhou period, circa 1046 BCE to 771 BCE, was characterized by a decentralized feudal system. The Zhou kings granted land to loyal relatives and allies, who ruled semi-autonomous states. These feudal lords were expected to support the king militarily and perform ritual duties. This arrangement promoted stability and cultural cohesion in the early years, but eventually sowed the seeds of division. As generations passed, the ties of loyalty weakened, and local rulers began to assert greater independence. Ritual and propriety, li, were central to Zhou society. The Zhou court emphasized ancestral worship, sacrificial rites, and the codification of ceremonial practices. These rituals reinforced hierarchical relationships and cosmic harmony. Confucius, who lived during the later Eastern Zhou period, looked back to the early Zhou as a golden age of moral rectitude and social order. His reverence for Zhou rituals would become a cornerstone of Confucian philosophy. With the fall of the Western Zhou capital to invading nomads in 771 BCE, the dynasty entered its Eastern Zhou phase, marked by increasing political fragmentation. The Eastern Zhou is further subdivided into the Spring and Autumn period, 771 BCE to 476 BCE, and the Warring States period, 475 BCE to 221 BCE. These centuries saw the decline of central Zhou authority and the rise of powerful regional states. During the Spring and Autumn period, more than 100 feudal states vied for power. Although nominally loyal to the Zhou king, these states pursued their own ambitions, leading to frequent conflicts and shifting alliances. Despite the turbulence, this era witnessed significant cultural and intellectual development. The 100 schools of thought emerged, giving rise to Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, and other philosophical traditions that would deeply influence Chinese society. The Warring States period intensified the struggle for dominance. The number of major states dwindled to 7, and warfare became more sophisticated and brutal. Technological advances, such as iron weaponry and cavalry, transformed military tactics. At the same time, states centralized their administrations, implemented meritocratic reforms, and expanded their economies. Thinkers like Han Feizi advocated for strong legal systems and centralized control, laying the groundwork for the rise of the Qing dynasty. The Zhou kings, now symbolic figureheads, retained ritual significance but little real power. The erosion of their authority underscored the limitations of the feudal model. Yet, paradoxically, this era of disunion also incubated the philosophical and administrative innovations that would later enable imperial unification. By the end of the Warring States period, the Zhou dynasty had all but ceased to function as a political entity. Its demise came not with a single climactic event, but through gradual irrelevance. In 256 BCE, the last Zhou king was deposed, marking the end of a dynasty that had profoundly shaped Chinese identity. The Zhou dynasty's legacy is vast. It established the moral and cosmological framework for Chinese rulership, introduced durable political concepts, and nurtured a vibrant intellectual culture. The mandate of heaven, the centrality of ritual, and the ideals of virtuous governance would echo throughout the succeeding dynasties. Despite its eventual fragmentation, The Zhou era remains a defining chapter in the saga of the Dragon Thrones. Unity and Empire, Qing and Han dynasties. The collapse of the Zhou dynasty gave way to one of the most pivotal periods in Chinese history, marked by the emergence of the Qing and Han dynasties. These two dynasties, though distinct in their governance and legacy, together forged the first unified Chinese empire and laid the cornerstone for China's imperial identity. The Qing dynasty, though brief, enacted radical transformations, while the Han dynasty brought longevity and consolidation, shaping the trajectory of Chinese civilization for centuries to come. The Qing dynasty arose from the turmoil of the Warring States period. Under the leadership of King Zhou, who would later become Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China, the state of Qin defeated its rivals and unified China in 221 before Common Era. This unification was not merely territorial, but also administrative and ideological. The Qin rulers implemented sweeping reforms to centralize power, standardize systems, and eliminate feudalism. These efforts were rooted in the philosophy of legalism, which prioritized law, order, and authority over tradition and moral virtue. Qin Shi Huangdi embarked on a series of monumental projects to solidify his rule and create a sense of imperial unity. He ordered the construction of a vast network of roads and canals to facilitate military movement and trade. Weights, measures, currency, and even the script were standardized across the empire, creating a cohesive economic and cultural landscape. Perhaps the most iconic of his initiatives was the early construction of the Great Wall, aimed at repelling northern nomadic invaders. This ambitious undertaking, though rudimentary compared to later iterations, symbolized the emperor's will to protect and define the Chinese realm. Despite these achievements, the Qin regime was notoriously harsh. Legalist doctrine demanded absolute obedience to the state, and punishments were severe. Dissent was quashed with ruthless efficiency. The infamous burning of books and burial of scholars exemplifies the regime's intolerance for alternative thought, especially Confucian ideals. These policies bred resentment and rebellion. Just 15 years after its founding, the Qin dynasty collapsed in 206 before Common Era, overwhelmed by revolts and internal dissent. Yet the legacy of the Qin was profound. It established the structural and administrative blueprint of a centralized empire, one that the succeeding Han dynasty would inherit and refine. The Han dynasty, founded by Liu Bang, a commoner who rose through the ranks to become Emperor Gaozu, marked a return to relative moderation and stability. Lasting over 4 centuries, from 206 before Common Era to 220 Common Era, the Han dynasty is often regarded as a golden age in Chinese history. One of the most significant contributions of the Han dynasty was the synthesis of legalist and Confucian principles. While the Han retained the centralized bureaucracy and legal framework of the Qin, they softened its rigidity by promoting Confucianism as the guiding state ideology. Confucian scholars were elevated to official positions, and education in the Confucian classics became the foundation of civil service examinations. This ideological shift emphasized moral governance, filial piety, and social harmony. Administratively, the Han dynasty expanded and improved the systems initiated by the Qin. The empire was divided into commanders and counties, each governed by appointed officials accountable to the central government. A meritocratic bureaucracy, though still influenced by aristocratic ties, began to take root. This structure enabled the Han to manage a vast and diverse empire effectively. The Han dynasty was also a period of remarkable territorial expansion and diplomatic engagement. Under Emperor Wu, who reigned for over 5 decades, the Han pushed their borders deep into Central Asia, Korea, and northern Vietnam. These military campaigns were accompanied by the establishment of the Silk Road, a vast trade network that connected China to the West. The Silk Road facilitated not only the exchange of goods such as silk, spices, and precious metals, but also the transmission of ideas, technologies, and religions. Culturally, the Han era saw a flourishing of arts, science, and literature. Innovations in astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and engineering were recorded in compendiums such as the Records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian, a monumental work that laid the foundation for Chinese historiography. Han art featured intricate bronze work, lacquerware, and jade carvings, while Confucian values permeated poetry and prose. Socially, the Han dynasty brought both progress and complexity. While commoners experienced some economic growth and social mobility, they also bore the brunt of taxation and conscription. The ideal of a benevolent ruler coexisted with the realities of court intrigue, corruption, and peasant unrest. As the dynasty aged, internal divisions, eunuch factions, and regional warlords eroded imperial authority. Religion and cosmology also evolved during the Han period. Confucianism remained dominant, but Taoist and Buddhist influences began to spread, especially in the later Han years. Temples, sacred texts, and mystical practices proliferated, reflecting a growing interest in the metaphysical and spiritual dimensions of life. This religious syncretism would become a hallmark of later Chinese dynasties. By the 2nd century Common Era, the Han dynasty faced mounting challenges. Natural disasters, economic inequality, and administrative decay led to widespread discontent. The Yellow Turban Rebellion, a massive peasant uprising inspired by Taoist millenarian beliefs, exemplified the deep-rooted social tensions. Though suppressed, the rebellion weakened the state irreparably. The final decades of the Han dynasty were marked by fragmentation and warlords, setting the stage for the Three Kingdoms period. Despite its collapse, the Han left an enduring legacy. The ethnic identity of the Han people, the dominant group in China today, derives its name from this dynasty. Its model of centralized, Confucian governance remained the ideal for centuries. The Han dynasty not only expanded the empire's reach, but also deepened its cultural and philosophical foundations. The Qing and Han dynasties represent the twin pillars of China's imperial architecture. The Qing, through force and innovation, forged a unified state. The Han, through diplomacy and cultural synthesis, sustained and enriched it. Their combined legacy established the rhythms of empire centralization, moral governance, legal order, and cultural continuity that would define Chinese history for generations. As we explore the subsequent dynasties, the imprints of the Qing's ambition and the Han's wisdom remain etched into the fabric of the Dragon Thrones. The Age of Division, Chaos and Resilience. The fall of the Han dynasty in 220 CE plunged China into one of its most tumultuous eras, a time of fragmentation, foreign invasions, and profound cultural transformation. This period, often referred to as the Age of Division, lasted for nearly 4 centuries and includes the Three Kingdoms, the Jin dynasty, and the Northern and Southern dynasties. Despite its chaos, this era also saw remarkable developments in art, religion, and regional identity, proving that even in disunion, the Chinese civilization endured and evolved. The immediate aftermath of the Han collapse was the tripartite division of the empire into the rival states of Wei, Shu, and Wu, a period immortalized in the literary classic romance of the Three Kingdoms. These three kingdoms, each claiming legitimacy, vied for supremacy through relentless warfare and shifting alliances. Although the Wei state ultimately emerged dominant and briefly reunified the empire under the Jin dynasty in 280 CE, the unity was short-lived. The Western Jin soon succumbed to internal strife and external invasions, leading to the disastrous War of the Eight Princes and the subsequent fall of Luoyang to nomadic forces. The next phase of disunion, the 16 Kingdoms period, 304 to 439 CE, saw northern China carved up by a succession of short-lived states, many established by non-Han ethnic groups such as the Xiongnu, Jie, and Xianbei. These nomadic rulers adopted Chinese titles and administrative systems while also bringing their own customs, resulting in a unique cultural syncretism. Meanwhile, in southern China, the Eastern Jin and a succession of southern dynasties managed to maintain relative stability, becoming havens for Han Chinese elites fleeing the north. The northern and southern dynasties period, 420 to 589 CE, entrenched the north-south divide. In the north, Sinicization of non-Han rulers accelerated, particularly under the Northern Wei, whose rulers implemented land reforms, encouraged intermarriage, and promoted Buddhism. In the south, the Liu Song, Southern Qi, Liang, and Chun dynasties cultivated refined court cultures, emphasizing literary elegance and Confucian scholarship. However, regionalism and aristocratic power often undermined central authority, perpetuating cycles of instability. Amid the political fragmentation, Buddhism flourished as never before. Originally introduced from India during the Han, Buddhism found fertile ground in the Age of Division. Monasteries became centers of learning, social welfare, and spiritual refuge. Influential monks such as Kumarajiva translated key texts into Chinese, while native thinkers like Sung Zhou developed sophisticated Buddhist philosophies. Cave temples at sites like Dunhuang and Yungang stand as testaments to the artistic and devotional fervor of the era. Art and culture reflected the era's complexity. Buddhist sculpture reached new heights of expression, blending Indian, Central Asian, and Chinese styles. Landscape painting, calligraphy, and poetry continued to evolve, often reflecting themes of impermanence and introspection. Despite war and instability, Chinese culture adapted, incorporating new influences and forging resilient identities. The Age of Division was marked by suffering and loss, yet it also demonstrated the remarkable adaptability of Chinese civilization. In the face of invasions, dynastic collapse, and shifting borders, the core institutions of Chinese culture, language, bureaucracy, and ethical systems survived and even thrived. This period laid the groundwork for future reunification and remains a powerful reminder that from chaos can emerge renewal. The Tang Dynasty, golden age of culture and power. The Tang Dynasty, which reigned from 618 to 907 Common Era, stands as one of the most illustrious and influential eras in Chinese history. Rising from the ashes of the short-lived Sui dynasty, the Tang Dynasty built upon its predecessors' achievements to usher in a golden age marked by political stability, economic prosperity, cultural efflorescence, and international influence. This period not only reinforced the enduring model of centralized imperial governance, but also witnessed the zenith of Chinese cosmopolitanism and artistic innovation. The founding of the Tang Dynasty began with the ascent of Li Yuan, who declared himself Emperor Gaozu in 618 after the fall of the Sui. A former general of the Sui and scion of a powerful aristocratic family, Li Yuan took advantage of the widespread rebellion and dissatisfaction with the Sui regime. His reign laid the administrative foundation of the Tang state, but it was his son, Li Shimin, later known as Emperor Taizong, who would solidify Tang authority and set the tone for its golden age. Emperor Taizong's rule, from 626 to 649, is widely regarded as one of the most effective in Chinese imperial history. A consummate statesman and military strategist, Taizong implemented a series of reforms that streamlined governance, reinforced meritocracy, and encouraged intellectual engagement. The Tang legal code, which he helped shape, became a model for later dynasties and even influenced neighboring civilizations such as Japan and Korea. The Tang bureaucracy emphasized competence over birthright. While aristocratic influence remained strong, the examination system was expanded and refined to recruit talented individuals into the civil service. Confucian classics remained central to these exams, but successful candidates were expected to demonstrate not only literary aptitude, but also administrative acumen. This meritocratic ideal fostered a dynamic, adaptable government capable of managing a vast and diverse empire. Militarily, the early Tang emperors embarked on campaigns that expanded the empire's borders and secured trade routes. Under Emperor Taizong and his successors, the Tang extended their influence across Central Asia, subjugating or allying with various Turkic tribes and consolidating control over the Silk Road. This expansion facilitated not only the movement of goods, but also the exchange of ideas, technologies, and religions. The Tang capital of Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, became a vibrant hub of international trade and cultural interaction. As one of the largest and most cosmopolitan cities of its time, Chang'an hosted merchants, scholars, and diplomats from as far afield as Persia, India, Arabia, and Byzantium. The city was laid out in a grid pattern, with government buildings, markets, temples, and residential wards meticulously organized. It symbolized the grandeur and order of the Tang state. Religiously, the Tang dynasty was a period of extraordinary pluralism. Buddhism thrived under imperial patronage, and many emperors commissioned the construction of temples and monasteries. Chinese monks traveled to India to study Buddhist texts and brought back scriptures, relics, and artistic styles that enriched Chinese spiritual life. The monk Xuanzang's journey to India and his subsequent translation efforts remain legendary. Taoism, as an indigenous tradition, also received state support, particularly during the reign of Emperor Xuanzong. The court often sought to balance the influence of Buddhism and Taoism, both of which contributed to the spiritual and ritual life of the empire. Confucianism, though less overtly patronized in religious terms, remained the ideological backbone of the civil service and educational institutions. This religious diversity extended to foreign faiths as well. Zoroastrianism, Nestorian Christianity, Manichaeism, and Islam found adherents in Tang China, particularly in the cosmopolitan enclaves of Chang'an and Luoyang. This openness reflected the dynasty's confidence and capacity to absorb diverse influences without undermining its cultural core. Culturally, the Tang dynasty represents a pinnacle in Chinese artistic achievement. Poetry, in particular, reached unprecedented heights. Figures such as Li Bai, Du Fu, and Wang Wei crafted verses that explored themes of nature, friendship, solitude, and political disillusionment. Their works, often deeply personal and yet universally resonant, became timeless treasures of Chinese literature. Painting and calligraphy also flourished. Tang artists experimented with new techniques, perspectives, and themes, blending realism with idealism. Court painters depicted historical scenes, courtly life, and Buddhist imagery with exquisite detail. Landscape painting began to develop as a major genre, laying the foundation for later Song masterpieces. In music and dance, the Tang court sponsored elaborate performances that incorporated Central Asian and Indian influences. Instruments such as the pipa and the ruan gained popularity, and music ensembles from foreign lands performed regularly in the imperial palace. The arts were not limited to the elite. Festivals, public recitations, and theatrical performances ensured that culture permeated all levels of society. Technological and scientific advancements were also notable during this era. Innovations in woodblock printing allowed for the dissemination of texts on an unprecedented scale. Agricultural techniques improved, leading to population growth and urbanization. Advances in medicine, astronomy, and cartography reflected a growing confidence in human knowledge and empirical inquiry. Despite these achievements, the Tang dynasty was not without internal challenges. Court intrigues, regional militarism, and succession crises periodically destabilized the regime. One of the most significant disruptions came with the Lushan Rebellion, which began in 755. Led by a powerful general of non-Han origin, this revolt devastated the empire, leading to the loss of millions of lives and the weakening of central authority. Although the Tang court survived the rebellion, it never fully recovered its earlier strength. In the aftermath, provincial military governors, jidushi, gained substantial autonomy, undermining the cohesion of the empire. The court struggled to maintain fiscal stability and enforce policy beyond the capital. Nonetheless, the post-rebellion Tang period still produced remarkable cultural output. Emperors such as Shenzong and Wuzong attempted to restore imperial authority, but their successes were limited. By the late 9th century, the dynasty faced renewed rebellions, economic decline, and the rise of powerful warlords. The final decades of the Tang dynasty were marked by fragmentation and decay. The infamous Huang Chao rebellion further destabilized the state, and the last Tang emperor was forced to abdicate in 907, ushering in the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. Yet the legacy of the Tang endured. The Tang dynasty's impact on East Asian civilization is immeasurable. Its models of governance, culture, and diplomacy influenced Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Tang-style temples, clothing, and literary forms spread across the region. Within China, the Tang period became an idealized age, a standard against which later dynasties measured themselves. The Tang dynasty demonstrated the potential of a confident, open, and culturally dynamic empire. It balanced military strength with administrative wisdom, spiritual diversity with ideological coherence, and artistic exuberance with scholarly discipline. In its golden age, the Tang dynasty embodied the heights of imperial Chinese civilization, setting a luminous standard for future generations to emulate and revere. The Song dynasty, innovation amidst vulnerability. The Song dynasty, spanning from 960 to 1279 Common Era, marked an extraordinary chapter in Chinese history defined by remarkable advancements in technology, economy, culture, and administration. Despite its persistent military vulnerabilities and territorial constraints, the Song era remains a period of intellectual brilliance and societal evolution. Divided into the Northern Song, 960 to 1127, and Southern Song, 1127 to 1279, the dynasty endured political setbacks while cultivating a golden age of innovation and refinement that deeply influenced the Chinese world. The establishment of the Song dynasty followed the fragmentation of China during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. Zhou Kuangyin, a former general of the later Zhou dynasty, seized power in 960 and founded the Song as Emperor Taizu. His rise marked the end of incessant warfare among regional warlords. To prevent a return to military dominance, Emperor Taizu initiated reforms that placed the military firmly under civilian control. This civil dominance over the military became a hallmark of Song governance and contributed to internal stability, albeit at the cost of martial strength. Under the early Song rulers, central authority was re-established across much of China. The capital was set in Bianjing, modern-day Kaifeng, and a highly organized bureaucratic state took shape. The civil service examination system was greatly expanded, becoming the primary avenue for government service. This created a meritocratic elite class of scholar officials who were well-versed in Confucian classics and skilled in administration. The Song civil administration was characterized by meticulous record-keeping, detailed policy formulation, and institutional specialization. Government ministries were divided into clearly defined roles, and officials were rotated regularly to prevent corruption. Although factionalism and bureaucracy at times led to inefficiency, the state apparatus was largely competent and responsive. One of the most notable features of the Song dynasty was its economic transformation. China during this era experienced a commercial revolution, driven by agricultural innovation, urbanization, and the growth of trade. The widespread cultivation of Kampa rice, imported from Vietnam, enabled multiple harvests per year and led to a significant population increase. Agricultural surpluses supported the growth of cities, many of which became bustling centers of commerce, craft, and culture. The Song capital, Kaifeng, and later Linen, modern Hangzhou, in the southern Song period, were among the largest and most sophisticated cities in the world. These urban centers boasted shops, markets, restaurants, theaters, and public infrastructure. A money economy developed rapidly, and the widespread use of paper currency, the first of its kind in the world, greatly facilitated trade. The Song also made pioneering advances in science and technology. Inventions such as movable-type printing, gunpowder weaponry, and the magnetic compass emerged during this era. The printing press revolutionized education and the dissemination of knowledge. Books on philosophy, medicine, agriculture, and history became more accessible, nurturing a literate and informed populace. Song military technology, while advanced, was not enough to offset the dynasty's strategic weaknesses. The Song faced relentless threats from northern nomadic powers such as the Khitan Liao, the Jurchen Jin, and eventually the Mongols. Despite initial resistance, the Song lost its northern territories to the Jurchens in 1127, marking the beginning of the southern Song period. The imperial court fled south to establish a new capital at Linen. The southern Song dynasty, though territorially reduced, managed to maintain a strong economy and vibrant culture. The Yangtze River Delta became the economic heartland of the empire, with flourishing agriculture, sophisticated irrigation systems, and dense trade networks. The maritime trade in particular thrived, connecting China with Southeast Asia, India, the Islamic world, and beyond. Chinese ships, navigated using advanced compasses, dominated regional seas, and Song merchants established lucrative overseas markets. Philosophically and culturally, the Song dynasty marked the revival and transformation of Confucianism into what became known as Neo-Confucianism. This intellectual movement, led by thinkers like Zhou Xi, integrated metaphysical concepts from Buddhism and Taoism into the Confucian framework. Neo-Confucianism emphasized moral self-cultivation, cosmic order, and social harmony. It would become the ideological foundation of Chinese education and bureaucracy for centuries. Art and literature flourished during the Song era. Landscape painting reached new heights of subtlety and expression, with artists such as Fan Quan and Guoxi capturing the spiritual essence of nature. Poetry and prose remained essential forms of cultural expression, often reflecting the complexities of political life and personal introspection. Ceramics, particularly the famed celadon and white porcelain, were produced in refined forms that gained admiration both domestically and abroad. The Song era also saw an expansion of historical scholarship, with official histories, encyclopedias, and local gazetteers compiled in meticulous detail. Scholars sought to preserve and interpret the past, creating a rich historiographical tradition that reinforced cultural continuity. Despite its achievements, the Song dynasty struggled with persistent military challenges. The reliance on diplomacy and tribute failed to deter aggressive neighbors. Eventually, the Mongol Empire, under Kublai Khan, launched a concerted campaign to conquer the southern Song. After years of resistance, The Mongols breached Song defenses and captured Linen in 1279, ending the dynasty and establishing the Yuan dynasty. Though politically eclipsed, the Song dynasty's legacy endured. Its technological innovations laid the groundwork for future developments. Its economic structures influenced global commerce. Its intellectual achievements shaped East Asian philosophy and education. The Song period demonstrated that power could reside not only in conquest, but also in culture, governance, and innovation. In many ways, the Song dynasty encapsulated a paradox of strength through refinement. It shone brightly in the realm of ideas, administration, and artistry, even as it struggled against the forces of war and conquest. In the grand narrative of the Dragon Thrones, the Song stands as a testament to the enduring value of wisdom, creativity, and resilience amidst vulnerability. The Yuan dynasty, Mongol rule over the Middle Kingdom. The Yuan dynasty, spanning from 1271 to 1368 Common Era, represents a striking and complex era in Chinese history, a time when the vast steppes of Central Asia and the refined traditions of the Chinese heartland intersected under Mongol dominion. As the first non-Han dynasty to rule all of China, the Yuan dynasty was founded by Kublai Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, and emerged from the momentum of Mongol expansion across Eurasia. This period redefined the structure of imperial authority, international engagement, and cultural exchange in China. The conquest of the southern Song dynasty by the Mongols was the culmination of decades of campaigns launched by Genghis Khan and his descendants. The Mongols, a nomadic warrior people, initially swept across northern China, overcoming the Jin dynasty. Kublai Khan, ascending to leadership in 1260, pursued the conquest of the south with determination, eventually defeating the Song and proclaiming the Yuan dynasty in 1271. By doing so, he became not only the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, but also the Emperor of China, a dual title that symbolized a fusion of steppe and sedentary civilizations. Kublai Khan established his capital at Dadu, modern-day Beijing, which he developed into a political and cultural center. Though deeply rooted in Mongol tradition, Kublai adopted many aspects of Chinese governance to legitimize his rule. He retained much of the bureaucratic structure from previous dynasties, but altered its hierarchy to privilege Mongols and other non-Han ethnic groups. A four-tiered social system was introduced, with Mongols at the top, followed by Central Asians, Northern Chinese, and Southern Chinese at the bottom. This ethnic stratification created tension and resentment, particularly among the Han population. Despite these divisions, Kublai Khan implemented significant reforms aimed at stabilizing and enriching his realm. He introduced new legal codes and expanded infrastructure projects, including the revitalization of the Grand Canal, which facilitated grain transport between the fertile south and the political center in the north. The empire also standardized weights and measures, enhanced postal relay systems, and fostered agricultural reconstruction after years of war. Economically, the Yuan dynasty encouraged trade and commerce, benefiting from the expansive Mongol Empire that stretched from the Korean peninsula to Eastern Europe. The reopening and securing of the Silk Road under Mongol protection enabled a flourishing of international trade. Merchants from Persia, Arabia, and Europe traveled to China, bringing with them exotic goods and foreign knowledge. Marco Polo, the Venetian traveler who spent over a decade in Yuan China, famously documented the wealth and sophistication of Kublai Khan's court, though some of his claims remain debated by historians. The Yuan economy relied heavily on agriculture and trade, yet it also suffered from systemic problems. Paper currency was issued in large quantities to support government expenditure, but over-reliance on it eventually led to inflation and financial instability. Furthermore, natural disasters, including floods and droughts, disrupted agricultural production and undermined local economies, exacerbating popular discontent. Culturally, the Yuan dynasty was a period of pluralism and hybridization. Mongol patronage extended to various religions, including Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Nestorian Christianity, and indigenous shamanism. Temples, mosques, and churches stood alongside each other in many cities. Tibetan Buddhism, in particular, gained favor at court, and Kublai Khan maintained close ties with Tibetan lamas who played both spiritual and political roles. The Mongol rulers also left their mark on Chinese arts and literature. Yuan drama, or zaju, flourished as a new form of popular theatrical performance. It featured a blend of spoken dialogue, music, and poetic lyrics, and was often used to express themes of injustice, loyalty, and fate. Writers such as Guan Hanqing became iconic figures of this genre. Additionally, painting and calligraphy continued to evolve, with literati artists expressing a sense of personal melancholy and philosophical introspection, often reflecting on the loss of Han sovereignty. While the Yuan dynasty initially brought unity and openness, over time, internal contradictions and external pressures began to erode its foundations. The administrative preference for foreigners alienated native Chinese elites. Corruption and inefficiency spread through the bureaucracy. Peasant uprisings, such as the Red Turban Rebellion, erupted in response to oppressive taxation, misrule, and economic hardship. The succession crisis after Kublai Khan's death in 1294 further weakened the dynasty. Power struggles among Mongol princes fractured central authority. The empire's vast territory became increasingly difficult to govern, and regional warlords gained power. Meanwhile, Han Chinese resistance movements gained momentum, fueled by a desire to restore native rule. In 1368, Zhou Yuanzhang, the leader of one such movement and a former Buddhist monk, captured Dadu and proclaimed the founding of the Ming dynasty. With this transition, the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty came to an end on Chinese soil, though remnants of the Yuan court retreated to Mongolia and maintained a northern Yuan dynasty for several more decades. The Yuan dynasty's legacy is multifaceted. It demonstrated the potential of cross-cultural governance and global connectivity, while also revealing the tensions inherent in imperial rule by foreign conquerors. The Mongol influence introduced new ideas, technologies, and peoples into China, enriching its cultural mosaic. At the same time, the Yuan experience reinforced the central importance of Han identity, which would be strongly reasserted in the following Ming dynasty. In the grand continuum of the Dragon Thrones, the Yuan dynasty occupies a unique position, neither a continuation of traditional Chinese rule nor a complete departure from it. It was an empire where steppe warriors ruled from Chinese palaces, where foreign merchants mingled with Confucian scholars, and where the pulse of the Mongol horde echoed through the Forbidden City. This chapter in China's dynastic saga reminds us that empire, for all its grandeur, is a fragile balance of power, culture, and legitimacy. The Ming dynasty, restoration, power, and isolation. The Ming dynasty, which lasted from 1368 to 1644 Common Era, represents a powerful resurgence of native Han Chinese rule after nearly a century of Mongol domination. Founded by Zhou Yuanzhang, who would become Emperor Hongwu, the Ming dynasty was characterized by its efforts to restore traditional Chinese culture, centralize authority, and fortify China's borders. It was a period of impressive architectural feats, maritime expeditions, economic recovery, and cultural flowering, but also one marked by deep paranoia, rigid autocracy, and eventual isolation. The origins of the Ming dynasty lie in the widespread unrest of the late Yuan period. As the Mongol regime faltered due to corruption, succession disputes, and peasant revolts, various rebel factions emerged across China. Zhou Yuanzhang, born into poverty and orphaned early, joined the Red Turban Rebellion and gradually rose through its ranks. Possessing both strategic acumen and popular appeal, Zhou conquered key territories and in 1368 declared himself the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty. He established his capital in Nanjing and set about rebuilding the empire from its war-torn ruins. Emperor Hongwu's reign was transformative. A staunch advocate of centralized power, he dismantled the influence of aristocratic families and reduced the power of ministers. He abolished the prime ministership, choosing to govern directly with the aid of a secret police force known as the Embroidered Uniform Guard. These agents monitored officials and commoners alike, creating a climate of fear but also reinforcing imperial authority. The emperor also instituted a comprehensive legal code, the De Ming Lu, which remained influential for centuries. Agricultural recovery and rural stability were central to Hongwu's vision. Land was redistributed to loyal soldiers and peasants, and tax burdens were reduced to encourage cultivation. Extensive public works projects were initiated, including dikes, canals, and granaries. These efforts led to a significant revival in population and productivity. Simultaneously, the emperor launched purges against officials suspected of disloyalty, resulting in mass executions and a culture of bureaucratic caution. After Hongwu's death, his son Yongle usurped the throne in a coup against his nephew, the Jiangwen emperor, initiating one of the most dynamic periods in Ming history. Yongle moved the capital to Beijing and commissioned the construction of the Forbidden City, a grand imperial palace complex that symbolized the majesty and isolation of the throne. He also ordered the compilation of the Yongle Encyclopedia, an ambitious effort to gather all Chinese knowledge into a single collection. Perhaps the most extraordinary feature of Yongle's reign was his sponsorship of the maritime voyages led by the eunuch Admiral Zheng He. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng He commanded 7 massive expeditions across the South China Sea and Indian Ocean, reaching as far as East Africa. These journeys showcased the Ming's naval prowess, facilitated diplomatic exchanges, and brought exotic goods and tribute to the imperial court. However, these expeditions were abruptly halted after Yongle's death, as subsequent emperors viewed them as extravagant and unnecessary. The Ming dynasty's middle period was marked by a renewed focus on Confucian orthodoxy, administrative stability, and commercial growth. The civil service examination system was revived and expanded, producing a class of scholar officials steeped in classical learning. These bureaucrats managed an elaborate state apparatus that extended deep into local society. The empire was divided into provinces, prefectures, and counties, each governed by appointed officials who reported to the central government. China during the Ming era saw significant economic dynamism. Markets flourished, and domestic trade expanded due to improved transportation networks. The use of silver as the primary medium of exchange, driven by imports from Japan and the Spanish Americas, integrated China into global trade circuits. Cities like Suzhou, Hangzhou, and Nanjing became centers of commerce, craftsmanship, and culture. Art and literature also experienced a renaissance. Ming porcelain, particularly the iconic blue and white ware, became a symbol of refined taste and was highly sought after both at home and abroad. Woodblock printing enabled the proliferation of novels, plays, and encyclopedic texts. Works like Journey to the West and The Plum in the Golden Vase became enduring classics. Landscape painting, calligraphy, and garden design flourished, reflecting a synthesis of scholarly ideals and aesthetic elegance. Religious life in the Ming dynasty was diverse. Confucianism remained dominant in state ideology, but Taoism and Buddhism retained broad popular appeal. Folk religion thrived, especially in rural areas, with local gods and ancestral worship playing vital roles in daily life. The late Ming period also witnessed the arrival of Jesuit missionaries, such as Matteo Ricci, who introduced Western science and Christianity to the Chinese elite. These cultural exchanges, while limited, had a lasting impact on Chinese intellectual circles. Despite these achievements, the Ming dynasty began to show signs of decay in its later years. The imperial court became increasingly disconnected from the populace, while court eunuchs gained undue influence and manipulated emperors for personal gain. Natural disasters, such as floods and famines, strained state resources and fueled peasant unrest. The economic burden of maintaining border defenses, particularly against the rising power of the Manchus in the northeast, further weakened the treasury. Corruption permeated the bureaucracy, and officials often prioritized personal advancement over effective governance. The Wanli Emperor, who reigned for nearly half a century, withdrew from state affairs in frustration, setting a precedent for imperial disengagement. This absenteeism allowed eunuchs and factional cliques to dominate the court, exacerbating administrative inefficiency. The final blow came in the early 17th century. A combination of fiscal crisis, plague outbreaks, and rural rebellion culminated in the rise of Li Zicheng, a former postal worker who led a massive peasant revolt. In 1644, Li's forces captured Beijing, and the last Ming emperor, Chongzhen, hanged himself on a hill outside the city. The Ming dynasty's fall marked the end of native Han rule and paved the way for the Qing dynasty, established by the invading Manchus. Yet the legacy of the Ming dynasty remains profound. It represented a period of confident Han Chinese governance, cultural pride, and artistic brilliance. Its achievements in governance, exploration, and material culture left enduring marks on Chinese civilization. The Ming ideal of moral integrity, scholarly governance, and architectural grandeur continued to influence both its successors and modern perceptions of traditional China. As the dragon thrones shifted once more, the Ming dynasty stands as a luminous chapter of renewal and paradox, a dynasty that soared with ambition and enlightenment, yet stumbled under the weight of its own complexity. It was a time when China looked both outward to the seas and inward to its ancient roots, navigating the ever-shifting tides of empire. The Qing dynasty, the last empire of China. The Qing dynasty, which ruled China from 1644 to 1912 Common Era, stands as the final chapter in the long saga of Chinese imperial history. Founded by the Manchus, a semi-nomadic people from Northeast Asia, the Qing dynasty managed to maintain a remarkably stable and prosperous reign for over 2.5 centuries, even as the world around it underwent immense transformations. This dynasty saw China reach the zenith of its territorial expansion, foster a rich cultural life, and endure the internal and external pressures that ultimately led to its downfall and the end of imperial rule. The origins of the Qing dynasty lie in the rising power of the Jurchen tribes of Manchuria, who had long interacted with and sometimes opposed the Ming dynasty. Under the leadership of Nurhaci and later his son Hong Taiji, the Jurchen Confederation reorganized itself into the Manchu identity and established the later Jin dynasty. With a sophisticated military structure, including the 8-banner system, and effective diplomacy, the Manchus consolidated control over Manchuria. Taking advantage of Ming weakness and internal chaos, the Manchus crossed the Great Wall in 1644. After Li Zicheng's rebel forces captured Beijing and the last Ming emperor committed suicide, the Manchus entered the capital and proclaimed the Qing dynasty. Their leader, Xuanji Emperor, became the first Qing emperor to rule over China proper. Though initially seen as foreign conquerors, the Qing rulers would gradually legitimize their rule by adopting many Chinese institutions and Confucian ideals. The early Qing emperors faced substantial resistance, particularly from remnants of the Ming loyalists in the south. The conquest was only completed in the late 17th century, during the reign of the Kangxi Emperor. Kangxi, who ascended the throne as a child and ruled for over 60 years, is remembered as one of China's greatest emperors. His reign was marked by military success, administrative reforms, cultural patronage, and a long period of peace and prosperity. Kangxi's achievements included the suppression of the revolt of the Three Feudatories, the incorporation of Taiwan, and successful campaigns against the Dzungars in Central Asia. He promoted Confucian education, engaged in dialogues with Jesuit missionaries, and supported the compilation of the Kangxi Dictionary, a monumental work that standardized Chinese characters. His enlightened rule set the tone for the High Qing period. Following Kangxi, his grandson, the Qianlong Emperor, presided over another long and illustrious reign. The Qing Empire during Qianlong's era reached its greatest geographical extent, incorporating Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia, and parts of Central Asia. Qianlong portrayed himself as both a Confucian sage and a universal ruler, commissioning massive cultural projects like the Siku Quanshu, an imperial encyclopedia that preserved and censored vast amounts of literature. Despite military and cultural achievements, signs of decay began to appear during Qianlong's later years. Corruption grew within the court, particularly under the influence of officials like Hushan. The empire also became increasingly conservative and resistant to reform, favoring traditional structures over innovation. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the Qing began facing unprecedented challenges. One of the most destabilizing forces was the arrival of Western powers and the onset of colonial pressure. The British East India Company, seeking to reverse its trade deficit with China, began smuggling opium into the country. The Qing government's efforts to curtail this trade led to the First Opium War in 1839. The war, which revealed the Qing military's inferiority, resulted in the Treaty of Nanjing and the ceding of Hong Kong to Britain. This was the first of several unequal treaties that eroded Chinese sovereignty and ushered in the so-called Century of Humiliation. Subsequent decades saw further foreign incursions and domestic unrest. The Second Opium War, conflicts with France and Japan, and the Boxer Rebellion all weakened the Qing state. Internally, the Taiping Rebellion, which lasted from 1850 to 1864, was one of the bloodiest civil wars in world history. Led by Hong Xiuquan, who claimed to be the brother of Jesus Christ, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom sought to overthrow the Qing and establish a radical, theocratic regime. Though ultimately crushed, the rebellion devastated vast swaths of China and exposed deep social and economic grievances. Efforts to modernize the Qing state came in fits and starts. The self-strengthening movement of the late 19th century attempted to adopt Western technology while preserving Confucian values, but lacked comprehensive vision and support. The 100 Days Reform of 1898, initiated by the Guangxu Emperor, proposed sweeping changes to education, administration, and the military. However, conservative factions led by Empress Dowager Cixi quashed the reforms, reinforcing the status quo. By the turn of the 20th century, China was under immense strain. Foreign spheres of influence carved up Chinese territory for economic and strategic gain. The Qing court, deeply divided and widely viewed as ineffective, struggled to respond. In 1911, the Xinhai Revolution erupted, led by Republican revolutionaries like Sun Yat-sen. The revolution gained momentum rapidly, and by early 1912, the last emperor, the child Puyi, abdicated the throne, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. The fall of the Qing dynasty did not mark the end of China's historical narrative, but rather a dramatic transformation. The dynasty's legacy is deeply ambivalent. On one hand, it maintained stability, expanded the empire, and nurtured cultural achievements. On the other, it failed to adapt to the modern world and preserve Chinese autonomy. The Qing period laid bare the complexities of empire in a globalizing age, where traditional authority collided with industrial power and nationalist fervor. Culturally, the Qing left a rich and diverse heritage. Manchu customs merged with Han traditions to create a vibrant, multifaceted court culture. The arts flourished, from detailed court paintings to popular novels and operas. Scholarly pursuits were encouraged, but also tightly controlled, especially during periods of literary inquisition. The architecture of the Forbidden City, Summer Palace, and other imperial sites stands as a testament to the grandeur of the Qing vision. The Qing also navigated a pluralistic empire with remarkable administrative acumen. Policies of ethnic accommodation allowed Tibetans, Uyghurs, Mongols, and others to be integrated into the imperial fold, though not without resistance and suppression. The Qing understanding of sovereignty, multi-ethnic rule, and centralized bureaucracy continues to inform Chinese governance and identity in the modern era. As the last dynasty to sit on the dragon throne, the Qing symbolizes both continuity and rupture. It upheld the traditions of imperial China, even as it witnessed the collapse of the old order. Its final decades offer a poignant lesson in the dangers of stagnation, the need for reform, and the inevitable tides of historical change. In tracing the arc of the Qing dynasty, we arrive at the conclusion of a grand imperial saga story that, though it ended in abdication, lives on in the cultural, political, and historical consciousness of China and the world. Spanning over 3 millennia, the dynastic history of China is a profound and intricate narrative of resilience, transformation, and cultural continuity. From the semi-mythical origins of the Xia dynasty to the collapse of the Qing dynasty in the early 20th century, the story of the Dragon Thrones chronicles the rise and fall of empires, the ebb and flow of philosophies, and the enduring spirit of a civilization that has shaped the course of human history. At the heart of China's dynastic saga lies the idea of the mandate of heaven, a political and moral philosophy that asserted the divine legitimacy of emperors, contingent upon their virtuous rule. This concept not only justified the succession of dynasties, but also created a moral framework within which rulers were expected to govern. It reflected the deeply held belief that harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity was essential to a stable and just society. Each dynasty contributed uniquely to the tapestry of Chinese civilization. The Xia and Shang laid the mythic and material foundations. The Zhou dynasty introduced feudal order and Confucian ideals that would resonate through millennia. The Qin unified China physically and administratively, while the Han enriched it culturally and territorially, setting the model for imperial governance. The 3 kingdoms and 6 dynasties exposed the fragility of political unity, only to be corrected by the grandeur of the Tang. The Song dynasty pushed the boundaries of technological and artistic innovation, and the Yuan expanded China's global horizons under Mongol rule. The Ming restored Han Chinese leadership and fortified Chinese identity, while the Qing, in its twilight years, navigated a world rapidly moving toward modernity. What makes this saga especially compelling is its cyclical nature, marked by the rise of dynasties through conquest or reform, their flourishing through centralized governance and cultural achievement, and their eventual decline due to internal decay or external pressures. Yet, even in periods of collapse and chaos, the continuity of Chinese civilization endured. The state was reconstituted, philosophies were revived or adapted, and the people carried forward the legacy of their ancestors. Culturally, the dynasties nurtured a civilization known for its philosophy, literature, science, art, and architectural marvels. Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism intertwined to form a triadic spiritual and ethical foundation. The invention of paper, gunpowder, the compass, and printing revolutionized global knowledge. Chinese literature, from historical records to poetic verses, remains a window into the soul of past generations. From the Forbidden City to the Great Wall, monumental architecture symbolized both imperial authority and human ingenuity. Economically and technologically, China under the dynasties experienced periods of unprecedented prosperity and innovation. The Grand Canal linked north and south, bolstering trade and integration. Agricultural advancements supported population growth. Trade routes like the Silk Road connected China to the wider world, not just in commerce, but also in culture and ideas. Despite moments of retrenchment and conservatism, dynastic China was never wholly insular. It was both a beacon and a bastion, absorbing foreign elements while projecting its own influence. The dynastic cycle also reflected the complex relationship between the state and its people. While emperors were venerated as sons of heaven, their power was neither absolute nor immune to critique. Rebellions, uprisings, and philosophical dissent often emerged when rulers failed to embody Confucian ideals of benevolence and justice. The legitimacy of a dynasty rested not only on conquest or inheritance, but also on its moral conduct and ability to provide for its people. This enduring political ethic set China apart in the annals of imperial rule. By the fall of the Qing in 1912, China's dynastic era had come to an end, but its influence remained indelible. The Republic of China, and later the People's Republic, inherited the centralized structure and civilizational confidence that had been refined over centuries. Modern Chinese nationalism, diplomacy, and cultural revivalism all draw upon the legacy of dynastic rule. The grandeur and tragedy of the imperial past continue to inform China's quest for identity and direction in the contemporary world. The dragon thrones were more than seats of power, they were symbols of a civilization's capacity to endure, adapt, and aspire. They bore witness to triumphs and tribulations, to emperors who were both sages and tyrants, and to a people whose loyalty, resilience, and ingenuity shaped one of the most enduring civilizations in human history. The dynastic chronicles, we are reminded that history is not merely a record of the past, but a reservoir of wisdom. The empires may have faded, but their echoes still reverberate in the language, thought, and dreams of a nation that continues to evolve, ever mindful of the dragon thrones from which it once rose.